hardware and computer hardware and peripherals. Okay? So, I hope you understand or you will understand our discussion for today. Pero some of these devices are now familiar with you kasi nga po some of these devices ay ginagamit na po natin like the flash drive, the computer mouse, computer keyboard. Okay, pero i-introduce ko pa rin po sila kahit nagagamit na rin po natin sila. Okay, so for to start with, our objective will be we're going to identify the different computer hardware that makes up a computer. Then second objective, we're going to explain the hardware components are grouped together or are grouped according to their uses or according to their functions. Okay, so that is what are we going to achieve for this online class. Okay, now let's start with the central processing unit or yung tinatawag nating CPU. So usually, yung tinatawag nating CPU is yung malaking box, am I right? Pero yung tinatawag nating CPU, this is known as the brain of our computer, pero yung tinatawag nating CPU, ito yung napakaliit lang po niya na nakakabit po sa ating motherboard. Okay? Nakakabit po sa ating motherboard. Hindi po natin tinatawag na CPU yung tinatawag natin ngayon yung malaking box. Okay, yung malaking box na CPU. That is now what we call the CPU case or what we call the tower model. Okay, tower model, we have discussed it already on the different types of computer. So, ang tawag po natin doon is tower model or the CPU case. Okay, that is not what we call the CPU kasi sa loob ng box na yon nandun po yung motherboard at sa loob ng motherboard nandun po yung ating CPU. So, ano nga ba itsura ni CPU? Maliit lang po siya. Okay, so that is the CPU and it is known as the brain of our computer. So, dito po napaprocess lahat ng mga information. Dito po lahat napaprocess ng mga information na ipaperform ng iba't ibang computer peripherals like the monitor, the printer, and so on and so forth. Okay? So, kung mag-enter tayo ng information, let's say for example, magpa-press tayo ng letter A sa atong computer keyboard, ang gagawin ni computer keyboard is magsisend siya ng information or magsisend siya ng signal sa ating CPU through binary code which is zeros and 1. Okay? Magsisend siya sa ating CPU, tapos ang gagawin naman ni CPU is ipaprocess niya ito. Okay? Ipaprocess niya ito until such time magpapakita na siya sa ating computer monitor. Okay? Pero, of course, if a human brain is divided into the different parts, of course, the brain of our computer is also divided into different parts and it is three areas. That is the primary memory or the main storage, and of course, arithmetic logic unit, and the control unit. So, yan yung mga division ng ating brain of our computer. So, once we said primary memory, it holds the instruction, data, and intermediate and final result during processing. So, dito, from the word memory, isinisave na natin or isinisave ni CPU dito yung mga information kung saan yung mga ipaprocess na information para maibigay sa ating output devices like the monitor. Okay? So, once na nagbigay ng signal yung mga computer hardwares natin sa ating CPU, pupunta siya kay or isa-save ngayon ito ni primary memory. Okay? Then, after sinave ni primary memory, ipaprocess na ngayon ito ni arithmetic logic unit by performing the mathematical operation and logical comparison and division. Okay? So, through binary code, hexadecimal, and so on. So, mathematical operations na po yan bago pumunta sa ating monitor. So, let's say for example, sabi ko nga, once we press letter A, so, ipupunta ngayon ni keyboard yung signal na nag-press ka ng letter A sa keyboard kay primary memory. Tapos, isa-save ni primary memory yung information na yon, then ipaprocess ngayon ni arithmetic logic unit na nag-press ka ng letter A, i-convert niya ito ng zeros and 1, then until such time, ipapakita ito ni or ipapasa ito ni control unit sa ating computer hardware papunta sa ating monitor. Okay? So, yun po yung pagkakaprocess niya. That's why control unit receives instruction from the software or computer programs and execute them. From the word execute them, sa kanila po or sa control unit po ang last na pupuntahan ng ating command. Okay? So, to summarize it, let's say for example, sabi ko nga, once na nag-press tayo ng letter A sa keyboard, o example, nagpindot na ako ng letter A, so yung information na yon na nagpindot ako ng letter A, kukunin ito ni control unit. Okay, kukunin ito ni control unit, then ipapasa niya ito kay arithmetic logic unit for processing. Paprocess ni arithmetic logic unit na nag-press tayo ng letter A. Then, isi-save ito ni primary memory. Okay, isi-save ito ni primary memory na nag-press tayo ng letter A. Then, ilalabas ito ulit ngayon ni control unit papunta sa ating computer monitor. So, dito sa last part, dito na natin makikita na yung letter A ay na-press, or dito na natin makikita yung letter A sa ating computer monitor. Okay? So, dito sa part na to. Okay? So, yun po yung processing ng brain of our computer. So, yun po siya. Now, after the CPU, ano nga ba yung mga tinatawag nating primary memory or main storage para makapag-process yung ating CPU? We have what we call, once we said the primary memory, it accepts programs, statement, transfer information from input devices to an output devices. So, once we said input devices, i-discuss natin yan later on. Then, output devices, ano nga ba yung mga output devices? Okay? So, once we said primary memory, it is divided into 4 areas. Yung CPU divided into 3 areas. Then, of course, yung CPU, first area will be the primary memory. Now, yung primary memory, divided na naman siya ng 4 areas. 4 areas, that is what we call the input storage. Input storage, receive incoming data for processing. So, pupunta muna siya sa input storage. Sabi ko nga, nag-press tayo ng letter A, pupunta muna siya sa input storage. I-input muna niya, i-save muna niya bago ma-process. Then, ilalabas, once na i-input na niya, ilalabas na niya ngayon itong information na to papunta sa program storage. Then, dito, i-store na niya yung information na yun na nag-press tayo ng letter A. Then, ilalabas na niya ito ngayon sa primary memory for processing or na-process yung data. Okay, then ipapasa niya ito kay arithmetic logic unit for another processing bago pumunta sa control unit. Okay? So, yun po yung CPU or the central processing unit. Hindi po natin tinatawag na CPU yung malaking box, ha? Okay, now the primary memory. Ano nga ba yung mga iba't ibang primary memory na tinatawag natin? So we have number 1 is the random access memory or what we call RAM. I guess you're aware now with the word RAM. So it stores data, instructions, and instructions temporarily. Take note, temporarily. So ibig sabihin, pag nag-off yung ating computer, pag tinurn off natin yung ating computer, magiging buo ulit yung memory natin. Okay, madidelete lahat ng mga naka-open na information o lahat ng mga naka-open na application once we turn off our computer. Now, ayan po si random access memory. Okay, so kung napansin niyo, kung nakakakita kayo ng ganyan, yan po yung tinatawag nating RAM. Example, para mas maintindihan, let's say for example, we have 4 GB available memory sa ating RAM. Okay, now, nag-open ako ng Microsoft Office Excel. And once na nag-open ako ng MS Excel, 25% of the 4 GB RAM will be occupied. Okay, 25%. Example lang. Then, nag-open ulit ako ng Microsoft Word sa aking computer. Another 25%. So, ilan na lang natitirang RAM natin? So, 50% na lang. So, 1 GB na lang. Now, nag-open ulit ako ng PowerPoint presentation, 25%. So, ilan na lang natitirang memory natin? 25 na lang. Then, nag-open ako ng Facebook, 25% ang kinonsume ni Facebook or inoccupy ni Facebook sa ating RAM. Now, naka-open tong apat na to, which is 100% na. So, 4 GB na siya. Okay, 4 GB na siya, na-occupy na yung buong 4 GB. Now, gusto kong i-open yung Google Chrome. Okay? I-open ko yung Google Chrome, or let's say, wag nating example ng Google Chrome. Example na lang is, mag-open ako ng Twitter. Example na lang. Mag-open ako ng Twitter. Now, yung Twitter, kailangan niya ng 25%. Okay? Na memory para ma-open yung ating Twitter. Kaya lang, dito sa ating RAM, puno na yung RAM natin. Doon na yung time na mag-hang yung ating computer. Okay? Doon na yung time na mag-hang yung ating computer kasi once na napuno yung RAM natin, nas mag-open pa tayo ng another application, then, wala nang space for the memory, so, mag-hang na po yung ating computer. So, the solution will be close one of the application before opening another application. Or better yet, close all the application before opening another application. Kasi, once you close the Microsoft Office Excel, then magkakaroon ulit tayo ng free na 25% of the RAM. And once you close the Microsoft Word, magkakaroon ulit tayo ng another 25%. So, meron ulit tayong 50% na RAM. So, once you turn off your computer, then, mabubuo yung 4 GB RAM natin, mawawala itong mga to. Okay? So, that is the purpose, or that is how the RAM work. So, it stores data or instruction temporarily lang po siya. Temporarily, once na nag-open tayo ng mga iba't ibang application, doon lang po gumagana or nag-i-store si random access memory. Okay? So, yun po yung ating phrase primary memory. For the second primary memory, we have what we call the read-only memory. So, ito naman si ROM. So, does not lose its content even if the power supply or the computer is switched off. So, sa madaling salita, si random or si read-only memory or si ROM is now represent as the internal memory of your computer. Okay, so dito na nasa-save yung mga informations natin, yung mga documents natin. Okay, hindi siya nagsasave ng mga open application, pero nagsasave siya ng mga information like documents, pictures, videos, and so on and so forth. So, ito yung internal memory natin sa ating computer. And that is now what we call the read-only memory or the ROM. Okay, so yun ang pagkakaiba ni RAM. Si RAM stores its data temporarily, while ROM stores data permanently. Depende na lang kung i-delete niyo yung data. Okay? So, yun po si ROM. Now, after the primary memory, we have what we call the secondary memory. So, secondary memory kung sakasakaling kakailanganin natin ng mga additional memory or additional storage aside from the primary memory. So, for the first secondary memory is hard disk. Hard disk stores the computer's operating system or what we call the OS. In the Windows operating system, hard disk is labeled as drive C. So, ito na yung tinatawag nating local disk C sa ating computer. So, kung mapapansin, hard disk, dito naka-install lahat ng mga applications natin. Dito natin makikita lahat ng mga applications na naka-install sa ating computer like the Google Chrome, ano pa yung mga naka-install dyan sa computer ninyo, and other applications sa ating computer like Microsoft Office, dito siya naka-install lahat. Okay, including your operating system which is the Windows 7, Windows 10, and so on and so forth. Okay? At ito na yung ngayon yung tinatawag nating local disk C na nakikita natin sa ating Window Explorer. Once na click natin ang disk PC icon sa ating desktop. Okay? So, itong hard disk na to, ito ang itsura niya once na nabuksan. Pero reminder, kung meron kayong working hard disk, huwag niyong bubuksan until such time makita nyo ng ganito. Kasi once na napatakan ito ng pinakamaliit na alikabok, then sira na po yung hard disk. Okay? Itong disk na to, once na napatakan ng, or nalagyan ng pinakamaliit na alikabok, kahit konting alikabok lang, sira na po yung ating hard disk. Okay? So, please, huwag niyong bubuksan yung hard disk ninyo once na nakakita kayo ng hard disk, which is working hard disk. Okay, so another secondary memory is the optical disk. I guess you are aware with this one, which is a removable disk that can store large amount of information. Some of them, or yung CD, CD can store yung memory or yung capacity ng CD kasi is 250 megabyte lang, while the DVD is 7 gigabyte. Okay, so this is known as the optical disc. Okay, ay yung tinatawag nating CD or DVD. Okay, so optical disc po siya. Data is saved optical disc through a process of burning, yung mga binaburn natin dyan. Okay, so I guess you are aware with CD. Pag sinabi natin CD, ang capacity niya lang 250 megabyte, while DVD is 7 gigabyte. The next secondary is magnetic tape. I guess nakakita na din kayo ng ganito. It is used as a storage device in making copies of audios, videos, and dot file. It is employed with the use of tape drive. Tape. From the word tape, through the tape, nag-store tayo ng information through binary code or zeros and one. So, I guess nakakita na kayo ng ganito. Okay. So, yung mga music dati, sa ganito siya naka-store. Then, yung mga Walkman, sa ganito siya naka-store dati. And of course, sa sinihan, ganito yung ginagamit. Okay, ginagamit to show or to present movie in a big screen. So, yung tape na nakalagay doon, nandun po yung information or nandun po yung videos or audios. Yung tin tape na yan. Okay, so the tin tape can store videos and audios through binary numbers. Okay, so that is the magnetic tape. Next is flash drive. Ito, tinatawag natin siyang flash drive. Hindi natin siya pwedeng tawaging USB. Kasi ang tinatawag nating USB or the Universal Serial Bus, tinatawag nating USB is kung saan natin sinasaksak si flash drive. Okay? So, reminder, ang tawag natin dito is flash drive, but you can call them as jump drive, pen drive, or thumb drive. But please do not call them anymore a USB. Kasi yung USB is kung saan natin sinasaksak si flash drive. Okay? Nakuha po ba? So, flash drive, of course, is convenient storage device that can open to read files and write a new file. So, dito tayo nakakapag-save ng mga documents. Dito tayo nakakapag-save ng mga movies, musics, and others. Okay, so, flash drive po ang tawag natin dyan, hindi po USB. Next, secondary is floppy disk. I guess hindi nyo na ito naabutan. It is called as diskette, kung naririnig nyo yung word na diskette. It is not as widely used due to its limited storage capacity. Kasi nga, ang kaya niya lang i-store is 1.44 megabyte lang. So, napakaliit compared today na ang ini-store na natin ngayon is megabyte na po, or sa isang picture pa nga lang is naglalaman na siya ng 200 megabyte, ganun po siya. Pero ang ini-store lang po ni floppy disk is 1.44 megabyte. Yung standard floppy disk ha. Okay. Now next, secondary memory. Ay, wala nang secondary memory. So those are what we call the secondary memory, or those devices is used to have an additional memory aside from the primary memory. So their main purpose is to store data or information. So pag sinabi naman nating input devices, these are the devices that allow us to input our command inside of our computer. So let's say for example, yung mouse. Gusto kong i-select yung icon sa aking desktop. So yung from the word na gusto kong i-select yung icon, that is now my command. So paano ko yun sasabihin sa computer? Through the mouse. Okay? So through the mouse by clicking the icon. So yun yung command ko na i-click ko yung icon. Ngayon, paano ko ma-select yung icon na yun? Through the mouse. Kaya siya tinawag na input devices kasi magi-input tayo ng command sa ating computer using the following devices. So maglalagay tayo ng command natin using these different devices. So please wag po kayo may input from the word input, or wag po kayo malilito from the word input, maglalagay po tayo. Okay, ano nga ba yung mga devices natin na ginagamit natin para makapaglagay ng information sa ating computer? First one, keyboard. Di ba pag nag-type tayo, naglalagay tayo ng mga characters sa ating computer. Nakikita natin yung mga characters natin sa ating computer through the monitor. Okay, so keyboard is considered as the input devices kasi nag-i-input tayo ng character sa ating computer through the computer keyboard. Okay, so nag-input tayo ng mga letters through the computer keyboard. Next is computer mouse. It allows us to select programs. It allows us to open computer applications. Okay, so it allows us to select different object inside of our computer. From the word select or from the word allows us to point point characters, allows us to point applications inside of our computer. Nag-i-input na tayo doon ng command wherein we are going to use the computer mouse. That's why it is still considered as input devices. Next is scanner. Sa scanner, kaya siya nasa input devices kasi maglalagay tayo ng picture sa loob ng ating computer. Ang purpose ng scanner is to scan text or images. Once na nag-scan tayo ng text or images, pupunta siya ngayon sa loob ng ating computer and that is now what we call the soft copy of it. Soft copy of the printed copy. Okay, so naglagay tayo ng data sa loob ng computer through the scanner. Okay, usually naka-integrate ito sa mga printers, ganun. Next is the microphone. Kasi naglalagay tayo ngayon or nag-i-input tayo ngayon ng mga voice natin through the microphone sa loob ng ating computer. So that is the microphone. It records our voice. Next, we have the CD-ROM or the DVD-ROM. So this is the place where we put our CD. Okay, so ito yung device na nag-read ng ating CD para malaman natin kung ano ang nilalaman ng ating optical disc. Next, we have the web camera or what we call webcam. Okay? So, webcam, it records our picture. It allows us to take pictures. Tapos yung pictures natin na pupunta sa loob ng computer. That's why it is considered as input devices. Kung mapapansin, hindi ko na siya masyadong dinedefine kasi I guess alam nyo na kung anong purpose at functions ng mga devices na yan like webcam, keyboard, mouse, and so on. Okay? The next is output devices. Once we said output devices naman, it produces output na na-process ng ating CPU or na-process ng ating computer. So, output devices, example is printer. Bakit siya output devices? Kasi nagpro-produce siya ng printed copy na nasa loob ng ating computer. So, naglalabas siya ng information through printed copy of a document. Next is monitor. So, it is a visual devices. So, naglalabas siya ng mga information, or images visually. Okay? Naglalabas siya ng mga information or data or documents visually through monitor. Okay? So, alam niyo naman na siguro kung anong purpose ng monitor. Dito natin nakikita yung mga ginagawa natin once we press different devices or computer hardware peripherals. Next is speaker. Bakit siya nasa output devices? Kasi naglalabas po siya ng sound na galing sa loob ng ating computer. Okay, so yun po si speaker. And next also is headphones. Headphones is the same version of speaker, pero ang pagkakaiba nila, headphones is worn. Or ito yung sinusuot natin in order for us to hear sounds or audios. Okay, so that is headphones. And lastly is data projector. So it is considered as output devices kasi it allows us to show image into a big screen, into a big white screen. So ibig sabihin, nagpapakita siya or naglalabas siya ng information or naglalabas siya ng mga images na galing sa loob ng ating computer. Okay, so time check, 10:27, so we still have 3 minutes. So those are the different computer hardware and peripherals. So we have discussed the primary memory, the secondary memory, and of course the input devices, output devices, and of course the different storage. Now, For a summary, kindly please watch this video entitled Inside of Computer. Wait lang. Ayaw mag-play. Okay, pakisabi sa akin kung walang sound, ha? May sound po ba?
Yes, sir. Meron po, sir.
Summary po yan nung diniscuss natin kanina.
Do you remember when you first realized that your computer was more than just a monitor and keyboard? That between the mouse click and the video playing, there was something that captured your attention, understood it, and made it real? What is that something? Is it gremlins? Let's imagine that we can shrink down to the size of an electron and inject ourselves into a click of a mouse. If you took your mouse apart, you'd see that it's really a very simple machine. It has a couple buttons and a system for detecting motion and distance. You might have an optical mouse that makes these measurements with lights and sensors, but older ones did this with a hard rubber ball and some plastic wheels. Same concept. When you click the button on your mouse, it sends a message to the computer with information about its position. When your mouse click is received, it's handled by the basic input-output subsystem. This subsystem acts like the eyes and ears and mouth and hands of the computer. Basically, it provides a way for the computer to interact with its environment. But it also acts like a buffer to keep the CPU from being overwhelmed by distractions. In this case, the I/O subsystem decides that your mouse click is pretty important, so it generates an interrupt to the CPU. Hey CPU, got a click here. The CPU, or central processing unit, is the brains of the whole computer. Just like your brain doesn't take up your whole body, the CPU doesn't take up the whole computer, but it runs the show all the same. And the CPU's job, its whole job, is fetching instructions from memory and executing them. So while you're typing, maybe really fast, like 60 words a minute, the CPU is fetching and executing billions of instructions a second. Yes, billions, every second. Instructions to move your mouse around on the screen, to run that clock widget on your desktop, play your internet radio, manage the files you're editing on the hard drive, and much, much more. Your computer's CPU is one heck of a multitasker. But oh my gosh, there's a very important mouse click coming through now. Let's drop everything now and deal with that. There are programs for everything that the CPU does. A special program for the mouse, for the clock widget, for the internet radio, and for dealing with letters sent by the keyboard. Each program was initially written by a human in a human-readable programming language like Java, C++, or Python. But human programs take up a lot of space and contain a lot of unnecessary information to a computer, so they're compiled and made smaller and stored in bits of ones and zeros in memory. The CPU realizes that it needs instructions for how to deal with this mouse click, so it looks up the address for the mouse program and sends a request to the memory subsystem for instructions stored there. Each instruction in the mouse device driver is duly fetched and executed. And that's not nearly the end of the story. Because the CPU learns that the mouse was clicked when the cursor was over a picture of a button on the monitor screen, and so the CPU asks memory for the monitor program to find out what that button is. And then the CPU has to ask memory for the program for the button, which means that the CPU needs the monitor program again to show the video associated with the button, and so it goes. And let's just say that there are a lot of programs involved before you even see the button on the screen light up when you clicked it. So just the simple task of clicking your mouse means visiting all of the critical components of your computer's architecture. Peripherals, the basic input-output system, the CPU, programs, and memory, and not one gremlin.
So that is how the computer work once na nagbigay tayo ng information or nagbigay tayo ng command sa ating computer using the input devices. Okay, so question po?
Wala na po, sir.
Okay, so wala na. So nakapag-extend na tayo ng at least 2 minutes. So this is supposed to be a recitation, but I want you to realize it na lang before we end our lesson. Why is it important to know and understand the different computer hardware and its peripherals? Okay, so kung wala nang questions, then that's the end of our lesson. So I guess sana naintindihan po natin yung ating lesson for
Hi, sir.